Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the cop speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit! You got barbecue back there?
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM. The sportsbook born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
And just like that, we have put a bow on what was the first 12-team college football playoff, and we've got a national champion. They may have been the best team all year anyway, despite the losses. Welcome into BetQLU, friends, alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. We are presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. We are going to put a bow on the 2024-25 college football season, start to take a peek ahead to next season. Week 1 slate is already set, and it's stacked. And we will, of course, lean in, on college hoops as well, as that will be our focus for the next 2.5 months or so leading up to the tournament and the Final Four. But as mentioned, the button is on the college football season. Ohio State beating Notre Dame 34-23. Got a little interesting in the second half there. Thought maybe Ryan Day might be Ryan Daying it, but he did not. The Buckeyes held on. Will Howard didn't have a beautiful game, but he didn't have to. 17-31 for 231 yards. 2 tutties, no picks. Managed the football well, which he did really all year other than the 2 Ohio State losses. Quinshon Judkins, a big night. 2 touchdowns, 100 yards on the ground. Jeremiah Smith, 88 yards through the air, including a touchdown and the game-sealing catch on 3rd and 11. Buckeyes ended up dominating Choppy during this playoff run, outscoring their 4 opponents 145-75. Seemingly the Michigan loss and not playing in the Big Ten championship game were the wake-up call for this team. A lot of us looked at it at that point, myself included. I will go down now, probably having it chiseled on my gravestone, the one guy who did not believe in the 2024 Buckeyes until the very bitter end. But a lot of us thought the loss to Michigan would send them off into a tailspin, and it didn't. Instead, it refocused them.
Yeah, it really did. It absolutely refocused them. And the team that we saw play Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame, I can't understand how they lost a game all year. Like, you really can't see it. I mean, they ran through everybody. Now, even the Texas game, they were tied at 14. You know, they were still beating them by about 2 yards per play at halftime. They should have been up big time at half, and they weren't. They've dominated every game since the Michigan game. And, you know, you wonder if it was a good loss, right? You'll hear coaches talk about there's no such thing as a good loss. That was, man. I mean, that loss, it refocused Ryan Day. It refocused the team. And I wonder if the fan base turning against them kind of gave them a true Ohio against the world. It wasn't just Ohio against all the other fan bases. It was Ohio State against their own fan base, too. That's really what was in play there, too.
Well, and what was in play was also, I think, proving that you spent $20 million on your roster, you better be involved down until the very bitter end and most likely walk away with a title, John.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this, last week you guys gave me crap for going with using Sagarin ratings. But I mean, the guy's a dude.
He knows it.
So I mean, yeah, I think it's validating. I mean, they were the hottest team in football over the last month, and I think that's kind of what makes this new format kind of interesting. Because if we're in the old format in the old days, the last thing we see of Ohio State is that loss to Michigan. That's it. And their season's over, and they're not going to the 14 playoff, and they're not winning a championship. And Ryan Day is probably fired, right? I mean, he's probably gone with his record against Michigan. So there's a sort of crazy butterfly effect, with this new format. I don't think there are going to be a lot of situations like this, fellas, like every single year where a coach kind of redeems himself and saves his job, because obviously, like, if you make the playoff, you're not going to be on a hot seat. Ryan Day was like a sort of exception here. But I mean, yeah, man. I mean, they were 4-0 against the spread in this thing. They destroyed everybody. And yeah, I mean, we'll see how it kind of stacks up in the annals of history, right? As we get more and more sample size and things like that. But coming out the gate, man, just a dominant performance from Ohio State from start to finish.
And back-to-back champs from the Big Ten now, which further feeds into that narrative, whether you believe in it or not, that the two power conferences are coming closer to equal footing. We'll see how some SEC programs, in particular Texas, Georgia, a few others, Tennessee, I would keep an eye on definitely with a year of experience under Nico's belt at quarterback, how they bounce back. But just as we look at the two big mega conferences right now, Choppy, balance of power a little more even now, or does it still rest? I mean, I hesitate to say it's totally even because the SEC dominated for a decade, really. And now we have a couple of years of Big Ten teams winning the title. I don't think it's perfectly even. I still think the SEC is deeper than the Big Ten. But clearly the upper echelons of the Big Ten are going to be right there. The top 3 or 4 teams in the Big Ten are going to be ready to compete with the top 3 or 4 teams in the SEC.
Well, I think what you're seeing is what a lot of people in the SEC kind of secretly feared, is that the Big Ten has more money. That's and this in the NIL world, Ohio State has more money. Michigan, the same thing, right? They have a national fan base. They've got more Fortune 500 companies in state. Maybe Georgia with Atlanta, but Alabama doesn't have a ton of Fortune 500 companies in the state. Florida does, but they've got to share it with two other schools.
Right.
Michigan's a big place. Ohio's a big place. I think what we're seeing is the upper yes, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan are here, and you've got your upper echelon SEC, and then there's a gap, there's a void in the Big Ten. The SEC kind of has a better middle with your Ole Misses, your South Carolinas, they're better in the middle, but the upper echelon, at the very least, the Big Ten has moved even or gone ahead. And look, what SEC team other than A&M and Texas has ever spent $20 million on a class? I just don't know that the schools in that conference have that kind of cash, the cash flow within the state. That was one of the things Mississippi was always concerned about. If you're a school in Mississippi, how are you going to compete in the NIL? Like, how are you really going to do that? You don't have, you have to raise the money on your own. You don't have that kind of cash in state from like these big corporations.
Well, and that leads us straight to what Nick Saban had to say about this on McAfee the other day, John, talking about NIL and how this current system is, quote, unsustainable. I don't know if it's truly unsustainable. As long as the money is out there, I think it's sustainable. The question is just about how level the playing field is going to be, and whether, to Chop's point, that level of spending in places like Ohio, in Michigan, at Penn State, where they're paying guys to stick around for another year rather than going to the draft or transferring out in many cases, if it just levels the playing field between the Big Ten and the SEC. I understand if Nick Saban's really being some altruistic lover of college football and saying, oh, but woe is us, we'll lose the bottom half of the mega conferences, and we'll lose the Big 12s, and we'll lose the ACCs. Okay, I hear what you're saying, Coach, but I don't think that's what he's arguing for. I think he's arguing for the model that the SEC capitalized on for the decade previous to NIL.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think this is a format that is going to be very conducive. I mean, Ohio State is a great example of that, right? Like, underperformed relative to what they were. I mean, what were they, a 8 seed, 7 seed?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it was like no problem. Like in the NCAA tournament, 8 seeds aren't making runs like that, right? Like you just don't see that. It's a lot harder. But in this format, man, like Boise State, Memphis, Tulane, I mean, you name it. I mean, and even those Big 12 teams, right? Like Arizona State fought valiantly, you would say that, but I just don't see a year-to-year, upside for schools that play outside, and that's why the SEC and Big Ten are already pushing for, more automatic bids because they know the same thing. Why are we going to waste spots, man? The champ's coming from one of the two.
Yeah, more than likely they are, and I do understand. Look, like I said, if Nick Saban's trying to make this altruistic argument for the overall health of Division I college football at the Power 4, Power 5 level, I get what he's saying, and include the Group of Five. But I think it's more in his case probably about the SEC being caught by little brother, the Big Ten in this case. Either way, it's those two conferences that are running things now. It's the point still remains that you made there, John, to the extent that the top 8 teams, 7 of the top 8 teams, when you look at futures for next season, are Big Ten or SEC, and the 8th team is Notre Dame. So all the same usual suspects. Ohio State, the favorites at plus 450, Texas and Georgia at 650, Oregon 7-1, Penn State 850, Notre Dame 12-1, Bama 16-1, Tennessee at 20-1, Clemson tied with them at 20-1 as the first non-Big Ten or SEC team. When you look at some of these futures, John, any numbers jump out to you? I mentioned Tennessee 20-1. I mean, you got an SEC team with a quarterback, a young quarterback with a lot of experience under his belt now. He's been to the playoff, in fact, on the road in the playoff and took a whooping. But Tennessee is one I would have an eye on at that number in particular, 20-1.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like there's so much sort of quarterback uncertainty at a lot of these spots, that I do think, Tennessee would probably be at the top. Like if I'm going to make a future bet today on it, like it would be a team like Tennessee. And I appreciate you lobbing that up for me. I appreciate that, Chris Paul. You're not Chris Mack today. You're Chris Paul, right?
Dishing out dimes, baby.
There's just too much uncertainty, man. Like, I don't know. If I had a little bit more belief in Billy Napier, I would kind of like to get involved with Florida because I'm a huge believer in DJ Lagway, but unfortunately, Billy Napier's still the coach, so I have to stay away, unfortunately.
Here's my issue with Tennessee, and like I'm a Tennessee guy, so like I'm glad y'all are loving it. The odd numbered years are road heavy seasons for them. Bama on the road, Florida on the road. If you want to take them, fine. They do get Georgia at home, but you got to know, and they get Oklahoma at home too, but you got to know they're probably going to be a road team because they're going to have 2 losses. They're good, you know what I mean? And like,
but maybe maybe the path is being like we saw this year, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe you're not a road team in that scenario. You know what I mean? Maybe you're next year's Ohio State. You know what I'm saying? You lose 1 or 2 in conference, and you get slotted into one of those spots because you're still a Power 2 team. And I think the quarterback thing is the important part here. Just run through all the favorites off the top of the board. Ohio State, who's the quarterback? Texas, who's the quarterback? Georgia, who's the quarterback? Oregon, who's the quarterback? Penn State is the 5th team on the board. We know who the quarterback's going to be. Notre Dame, who's the quarterback? Bama, who's the quarterback? Tennessee. Okay, there's the first place where I'm certain I know who the quarterback's going to be.
Yeah, that's fair. And then it's a quarterback game. And that's all true. That's all true. They got they'll be okay. They'll be a good squad. I'm concerned though because if they lose those 2 road games to Florida and Alabama, that means they got to beat Georgia at home, and they don't play well against Georgia.
I mean, the week 1 slate already is just absolutely stacked. We got Texas, Ohio State in a playoff rematch, LSU, Clemson. I mean, one of those 2 coaches will screw the pooch somehow. Bama, Florida State, Notre Dame, Miami. Auburn, Baylor, low-key could be interesting. TCU at Belichick. Utah, UCLA. South Carolina, Va Tech. I mean, I can't wait. I'm already looking forward to Labor Day weekend, John.
Yeah, no, I mean, Texas, Ohio State. I mean, that's another team I should have mentioned, man. I mean, Arch Manning getting the full, slate of snaps. I mean, that's probably as good as any. next year, if he's anything like what we saw in that small sample. So, yeah, man, I think that's where I would probably go with a future bet.
We'll talk about those futures a little bit more, maybe week one. Maybe take a peek at the odds that are out there where you can get them on who the first overall pick will be as we finally shut the door, close the book, whatever analogy you want to use on the 2024 college football season. Start to talk hoops as well. A massive weekend out there and a chance for some teams who've been scuffling lately to get back on track. It's all on the way alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQLU presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
team.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker,
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
sports handicapper Rob Brown,
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
cycling all the top plays,
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
and one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, pick it in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
team.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Live coast to coast on the BetQL network every Friday night and Saturday morning. It is BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Don't forget, if you don't listen to us Friday night or Saturday morning, we're always available in podcast form inside your free Odyssey app, AUDACY. Download it today and take us with you. You can always watch the show as well on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack. Putting a button, a bow, whatever you want to call it, wrapping up the 2024 college football season before we move on to basketball. And there are some massive games in college basketball this weekend to keep a close eye on. We were just talking about futures odds on the 2024 season. We did not get to dive into, for those that can bet on it, odds for the number one overall pick in this year's NFL draft. Cam Ward, the favorite, at plus 105. Travis Hunter right behind him at 155. Shedeur Sanders plus 360. You get Abdul Carter, the Penn State edge rusher, at plus 950. And then you get out to some really long numbers. Teteroa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, is 40-1. Will Campbell, LSU, 60-1, as is Mason Graham, the D lineman from Michigan, at 60-1. Choppy, this feels like it's way up in the air with the hiring of the Tennessee Titans' new GM, who, by the way, in my opinion, looks just like Kevin Arnold's older brother from the old 80s show, The Wonder Years. But that's neither here nor there. The Titans, he said some things about Will Levis, the new GM, Borgonzi, I think is his name, Mike Borgonzi, that would indicate that maybe they've still got some belief in Will Levis in the building. But I got a hard time believing that if Cam Ward is available there at number one, they don't make that the pick.
Yeah. Look, if they truly like Will Levis, then I mean, I think it's you obviously have to weigh that in. I would not be surprised if they trade out. I would be surprised if they take Hunter. I don't want. I'll be honest. I do not want to pay the highest paid non-quarterback in a draft. I just don't want to do that. Like, you are begging for that 50-50 to fall flat in your face. If I were them, I'm trading out of it, or I'm taking a quarterback. I would not want to take somebody number one who's not a quarterback. But if they truly like Will Levis, they've got to get out of there. They've got to move away from that pick.
Yeah, that would be, if I had any level of belief in Will Levis, that would be my plan as well. It might even be my plan even if I didn't totally believe in Will Levis, which is why I might talk him up and then look to get out of that spot, because I don't personally believe either one of these quarterbacks, Sanders or Ward, is worth the first overall pick. But, John, we know how NFL teams panic when they feel like they may need a quarterback and there's one available. Look, I think in a lot of years, Sanders and Ward are barely first-round picks, but this is what happens when you're the top 2 quarterback in a draft class. You get pushed right up into the top 5.
Yeah, and Ben Johnson said it yesterday, earlier in the week when he was introduced in Chicago. He said quarterback success is the biggest metric of predictive success. It's more predictive to winning than even turnover margin, which, I mean, as we all know in the NFL is like the thing. I mean, look no further than Baltimore-Buffalo last weekend. Baltimore outplayed Buffalo in every single facet of the game, but they had 3 turnovers to Buffalo's none. And Ben Johnson says the analytics proved that quarterback success is even more important than that. And so I don't think there's any way on this planet that you could, if you're Brian Callahan or the new general manager there in Tennessee, believe that Will Levis is your key to success in the future. There's just absolutely no way. He hasn't shown that at all, and he had an entire year to do it, and he didn't. He was awful. He was one of the worst ever. So they're going to draft a quarterback, and I'm a big proponent in that. I'm a big proponent in, keep swinging until you find him. Because what else are you going to do? I mean, you could be like a Raider, right? You could be the Raiders, and like you could be kind of wandering through the wilderness, with no future and no hope in sight. So you got to go quarterback, and that's what they'll do.
Yeah, especially with this quarterback free agent class. Like it is a desert. It is hoping that Sam Darnold didn't turn into a pumpkin in January, and then just a bunch of dudes, right? Like the next best free agent quarterback out there probably in this class is what? Justin Fields ? Like, I mean, that's it. So Choppy, that's I mean, do we even know that Milroe's going to declare for the draft? I mean, so that's the other thing. If I'm Jalen Milroe, and I think I said this a couple weeks ago after we watched the New Year's Day bowl games, I'm going back for another year. I'm not letting the last thing evaluators have stamped in their minds about me is absolutely melting down in a meaningless bowl game against Michigan. So if you're looking for a quarterback this offseason and you're in the top 5, as much as I don't believe Choppy in Sanders or Ward, to John's point, you might have to just take a swing and see where it takes you for the next few years.
Yeah, you might have to. I mean, look, here's the problem. If you're in the AFC, there are 4 quarterbacks that matter: Burrow and Allen and Lamar and Patrick Mahomes. You have in the NFC, you got to build a roster. It's just the way it is. There's not really the elite quarterback in the NFC. Maybe Stafford is like he's the most accomplished, but there's nobody that's like those 4 in the NFC. You have to compete with that, and if you don't have that, and trust me, they know if you have that or not, and you can see whether you have it or not. Yeah, you got to take a chance on it. And your evaluation be damned. I mean, nobody evaluated Patrick Mahomes to be this. Nobody evaluated Tom Brady to be what he is. So you got to just kind of take the ego shot and say, you know what, maybe we don't know what we're doing when it comes to quarterback evaluations. We're just going to take a guy because we need a guy.
Yeah, and you better really believe in your offensive coordinator too. Like Jaden Daniels is really good this year without Cliff Kingsbury. He's not what he's become without Cliff Kingsbury. Like that is a big part of this too, John. You better have somebody that you trust to help that young quarterback develop. Again, not everybody is going to be Jaden Daniels, but you're sure as hell going to be a whole lot better if there's somebody there to help them along.
Oh yeah, I mean it's imperative, and have that in place. I mean, I don't know. I didn't really see a lot from them last year, but again, that could be, a function of Will Levis. I mean, Brian Callahan obviously, coming over from Cincinnati. I mean, he how responsible is he for Joe Burrow? How responsible is Joe Burrow for him? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, you got to have some bright minds. That's the bottom line. And as a Raider fan, I just saw a stat today that we are the only franchise in the last, I don't, maybe it's ever. Maybe it's like ever. We're the only franchise that has not had an NFL a head coaching hire as one of our coordinators. Like, in other words, no one has ever hired a Raiders offensive or defensive coordinator from that job to be a head coach. It's never happened.
Oh, wow.
I mean, Callahan was promoted from within, right? But that doesn't count. It's like
so outside the team.
Yeah. So, and that explains there. And I know that people are lining up to hire Arthur Smith, obviously, after the year he had. So, you got it. You certainly got to have some innovation going on inside those rooms for sure.
Man, Arthur Smith. It will be interesting to see if the Titans are willing to trade out. And I believe as we get closer to this thing, they will be willing to trade out of that spot, whether they believe in Levis or not. What the sweepstakes becomes, because you're weighing, obviously, the opportunity to take whoever you want first overall against the idea that neither one of these guys may necessarily be worth a first overall pick in an average. So you bring up your Raiders, John. Like, the Raiders desperately need a quarterback, and if they can move up to one, I imagine they will take a swing at that if the opportunity presents itself, because they have to. But to know that you're then swinging on Ward or Sanders, and this isn't, that's why I would be so much more likely in this case to trade back out of a top 2 or 3 spot in this draft, accumulate some picks in the future, and come back in 26, hopefully in the top 5 again, and be able to take the swing at Arch Manning or whoever else comes up in the 26 class.
Yeah, I mean, if it all breaks that way, I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times, the Raiders have won, and I'm just using them as an example, but have won stupid games that have taken them out. I mean, it's very hard to get the number 1 pick, like, it takes real effort. Like, how are the Giants not the number 1 pick? I mean, we would have said for 16 weeks they were the absolute guarantee at number 1, and they still couldn't do it. So that's the thing, is like, best laid plans, all that. What they say about the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think you kind of just got to take the quarterback, man, because there's no quota. There's no limit on how many quarterbacks you can take in a row.
Right. That's right. I mean, look, where's Washington this year? So Washington lost a game on on Christmas Eve last year to the Jets. Greg the leg, last second field goal, right? And without that Jets win, Washington doesn't get the number 2 pick in the draft. They're probably stuck with Joe Alt, or maybe they get Malik Neighbors, right? Somebody else is the number 2 pick. That team with the number 2 pick has Jaden Daniels. And that team is where like Washington, it's not the roster, it's not the coach, it's not the GM, it's the quarterback, man. And you got to find one. And that's the formula. It's the formula in the NFL, it's the formula in the NFC. And the way to do it is to have the cheat code. That's a quarterback on a rookie deal.
Since we were talking about him, and he's playing this weekend, I know, best bets we always leave wide open for absolutely anything. It doesn't have to be college. So there's a good chance we may go in the direction of the conference championship games with some of our best bets. But we got a couple minutes here. Let's talk about these 2 conference championship games. Washington getting 6 on the road at Philly, Buffalo getting 1.5 at Arrowhead on Sunday. John, I hesitate to say this because it's not an easy task. But if the Commanders' defense can do anything at all to slow down Saquon Barkley, I think they've got a shot in this thing. And not just a shot to cover the 6. Like, you force Hurts into some mistakes, and you keep Barkley from, again, it's so much easier said than done, but you keep Barkley from running all over you. I think they've got a chance in a divisional game to upset the Eagles.
I'm in complete agreement. I mean, Jalen Hurts has looked dreadful in these first 2 games. I mean, and then he got hurt again, with the knee injury there in the Rams game. So, I just, I look back to last week. I mean, Saquon went off, right? I mean, Saquon went off against the Rams again, had a couple of long touchdown runs, and that was still a 6-point game. And that was against Matt Stafford, who runs like my deceased grandfather. Rest in peace to my papa. But, I mean, they run the same. And so
prayers up, papa.
Yeah, imagine, Jaden Daniels, who's got some real mobility and is a real threat to, make explosive plays. I have the Commanders. I took him at a bad number. I played him at 5, but I'm not doing anything different. I mean, I'm staying with it, obviously, and I think they're live certainly, to win the game. I mean, Eagles have a couple of DB injuries as well, so I just think you got to ride the hot hand, man. You got to ride. It's like if you're at the craps table. Jaden Daniels has the hot hand, man. You got to keep riding it.
Boy, he does. I'll tell you this, though. Like, the defense does scare you. It has to. And you're right. Like, Jalen Hurts has played, as the kids would say, like booty cheeks. But, it doesn't change the fact that, Washington in that game still gave up like 8 yards of play in that Detroit game. I mean, they still gave up 8 yards per play. That's a lot. That's an awful lot, and that defense is not very good. Detroit kind of handed them that football game offensively by turning the ball over so many times. They just did. I mean, they turned over way too many times. But I do think that Washington is live here. Don't forget also about the curse of a losing Super Bowl quarterback in the salary cap era. No quarterback has lost his first Super Bowl, then gone back to it again ever. None of them have done it. So the last, prior to that, Jim Kelly lost his first and went back. Oh. John Elway lost his first and went back. Nobody's done it since. So
we've also never had a rookie quarterback go to the Super Bowl, Choppy.
Right? I mean, we've had a few.
Something ends this week.
Something ends.
Yeah.
One of those two stats ends. So, yeah, I think Washington's definitely live. There's no doubt about that one. I mean, they've got Jaden Daniels, and he's been the best player on the field in just about every game. Well, not just, but in every game he's played this playoff.
Something's got to give, except in Kansas City, where if any members of the Hockey League family have anything to do with it, the Chiefs will hold on against the Bills and probably go to the Super Bowl, and it won't matter who wins the NFC game. I've just resigned myself to being disgusted with that. We'll see how it goes this weekend. You may hear of those games again in our best bets before we wrap up, but we got to talk college hoops because there's more than a handful of massive games being played this weekend, and we'd like to touch on some of them, as well as some teams that maybe you went into the season believing in, and now there's a lot of question marks around them. Maybe even a lot of question marks around the self-described best coach in college basketball when he's not busy screaming at officials. We'll get into all of it next alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQL, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas.
You've been listening to BetQL, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Live coast to coast every weekend. Moving on from football now, right into the teeth of college basketball season. It is BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sports book born in Vegas, alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack, and yeah, there are some massive college basketball games being played this weekend. We'll get to those in a second. Best bets before we wrap up as well. Maybe hoops, maybe football of the NFL variety with the conference championship games this weekend. Who knows which direction we'll go for those. But as for college hoops, John, we've got some massive games in the SEC this weekend. And we were actually just talking while you stepped away for a minute during the break. It feels like we're getting SEC cannibalism in hoops now this year as well, on par with the SEC cannibalism we got in football this past fall in a major way. Nobody is safe on any given night, it feels like, in the SEC.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's far and away the best in college basketball, man. I mean, they're going to have probably 8, 9 teams on the, first 6 seed lines. I mean, they're legitimate. Even a team like, Ole Miss that lost last night on a buzzer beater. Georgia stinks, but they're probably a tournament team. I mean, and I say stinks like relative.
Right.
Yeah. You go through 10, 11 teams, they're going dancing. And you're going to have nights like last night, right? Like, Ole Miss, loses in dramatic fashion at home to A&M. No shame in that, right? Florida takes everything just to beat South Carolina at their place. So, you're just going to see that, throughout the year. But, It's as good as that league has ever been, man, for sure.
Dude, is it ever? I mean, I remember when the SEC was, you had to convince people it was a 2-bid league. And now you might get 2 teams in the top line. The committee is going to have a nightmarish decision and task to be able to seed these teams. You're going to have, multiple teams that are going to have to play each other in the Sweet 16, it seems like. They're going to try not to. They're going to try not to do it in the second round, but it's going to happen. I mean, if you get a certain amount of teams, it has to happen, or at least the possibility has to happen. You don't want to see somebody play each other 3 times. And then, let's say you play a team twice, then you meet them in the SEC champion in the tournament, and then you play them again in the NCAA tournament. You can play a team 4 times. Seems a bit much.
Yeah, but I mean, when the conference is stacked the way it is, you can only do so much to separate them, to your point earlier, through the first 2 rounds. And then, especially once you get into the Sweet 16, it's going to be hard to avoid one another. They won't be able to avoid one another, obviously, in conference play. Huge matchup Saturday night. Auburn probably laying close to 8, John, I would think, against number 6 Tennessee. Still no Johnny Broome. We don't suspect anyway, not practicing at all this week, so I don't think we'll get him Saturday night. Auburn has had their struggles, their ups and their downs without him. 8 feels like it's right on the cusp of I'm not touching it, even at home for Auburn against this Vols team.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Auburn has impressed me, with the way that they have managed without Janai Broome. But with that being said, this is a big step up for them. And I don't think that number will be 8 when we see it posted. I think that number will be much closer to 4 or 5. I think it's a tough matchup, with Tennessee's defensive ability here. And look, they've had their road struggles. There's no question about it. They lost to Vandy. They lost to Florida by 1 billion points. But I think this is a spot where you could see Tennessee kind of put their best effort out there against an Auburn team that, Mississippi State at home, very impressed with the way they did that. But that was the first game without Janai Broome. So you're, on 10 there, right? Then you beat an underwhelming Georgia team. So this is a big jump up in weight class, I think, for Auburn without Janai Broome. So I will probably be looking to get involved with Tennessee here.
It is a big jump. It's not going. John's right. It's not going to be at 8. But man, Tennessee, they just do not play well on the road. They don't. Even the Texas game, they didn't play great. It's not a good road team. And I don't even count Vandy. Vandy has its own problems. You know what I mean? Like, it's very difficult. If it's a close game at Vanderbilt, always, no matter what you do with that,
guys, man.
It really is. It really is. And you play there every year, but like, it doesn't matter what's going on. Any other team, any other arena in the country, you'd rather be in a close game on the road than Vandy, because it's so difficult to coach there because of the way the benches are set up. But I just, Tennessee just does not shoot the ball the same on the road, and it's probably going to result in a very similar way that it had with their other big-time road games where they wound up losing.
Some other high-profile teams that are struggling at this point in the year, UNC, still does not have a quad 1 victory on their resume. They've lost back-to-back games in conference to Stanford and Duke. They are firmly on the bubble, fighting for their life. Gonzaga has lost back-to-back conference games. Oregon State and Santa Clara, 6 losses on the season now, which even when you stack up some of those neutral site games that they play early in the year, is not a pretty number. And then UConn, John, they lost at home to Creighton earlier this week. Just defense has been totally missing some nights. You got Hurley screaming at refs. Look, I get that's part of him and his style, but this feels like it's rapidly approaching, and they're dealing with injuries too. But, John, it feels like we're rapidly approaching the wheels flying off the wagon here for the Huskies.
Yeah, I mean, I said this, I'm pretty sure on this show from the very beginning that they had no business being the preseason favorite. to win the championship again, to win 3 in a row. I mean, they just weren't that kind of team this year. I think Dan Hurley, and I understand it because it's worked for him in the past, but I think Dan Hurley put a little too much stock in guys that had maybe played sparingly. I thought he put too much stock in those guys taking steps instead of hitting the portal very hard, and they haven't really taken that many. They haven't taken that big a step. So look, they're probably a Sweet 16 team, but I don't view them or think of them as national championship contenders. They're pretty limited.
But we get to March, and if they've got good odds, you're definitely taking them. You're definitely going to throw some money there, right? It's just the way it is, right? They've earned that.
What's the number? Like I bought a preseason, not even preseason, last spring. I bought a UConn future, and I think I got it. Maybe it was during the summer, whatever it was. It ended up being like 14-1. It was after the season had started, I should say, and it sank back down to get that number. I mean, what's the number on UConn where you're willing to buy it knowing that you get value, but also on a team that, like I said, John, feels like the wheels are real close to coming off?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's no doubt that Dan Hurley is among the best coaches. I mean, he probably is right that he's the best coach in the game. I mean, I guess you could argue maybe Bill Self. He's got 2 championships as well. Woo! But yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely there. I mean, he's certainly top 3 at absolute worst when you look around the sport of college basketball. So, he's going to be live just from a schematic standpoint. But I think they have too many non-threats offensively on the court. You've got Diarra, who I've never personally witnessed make a shot. Samson Johnson is just very limited, cannot step out and shoot at all. They're depending on this freshman they don't have right now, McNeely. So, again, I mean, game to game, that's one thing. I just think they're way back in the line in terms of, real title threats.
2 days ago, BetMGM had him at 25-1. I'm all over that. Yeah. I'm all over that, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's just it's the way it is. They've earned that. Dan Hurley is a different animal. He gets those guys ready. He will come up with something. I just, yeah, there are other teams that are better. There's no doubt. Like, you're too late in the season to not be able to recognize that some teams are just better. But 25-1 is a good number. I mean, I would definitely take a flyer on that.
All right, time to get people our best bets for this weekend before we get out of here on BetQL. You doesn't have to be college, doesn't have to be hoops, could be anything you want. Could be the NFL Conference Championship games. John, I'll let you get us started. Oh, hold on, you're muted.
Oh no, Josh, you're muted. John, you're muted. Did I call him Josh?
They
did call him Josh.
They can't. Well, I, just for that, we're fading Josh Allen. Just for that BS.
Oh, okay.
I was looking at my Josh Allen prop that I had. That's what it was.
Yeah. No, listen. Chiefs minus 130. I if you want to play the spread, I'll go money line though. I'll say minus 130 because you never know if we get into a situation where somebody goes for 2. I mean the margins here are so thin. But I just trust the Chiefs. They're going to make one more play. They're going to get one more turnover. They're going to get one more sack. The Bills have the historic low in turnover percentage, like in the last 25 years, like lowest turnover percentage in the last 25 years in the NFL. And you just know that the Chiefs are going to somehow find a way to come up with a turnover in this game. So I'm going Chiefs minus 130 money line over Buffalo.
All right. I had a Josh Allen prop there, but I am with you that the Chiefs are going to win. So because of that, Patrick Mahomes is going to kneel down 3 times, and a kneel down in the NFL is a rush attempt. Ooh. So I'll take over 4.5 rush attempts for Patrick Mahomes.
Wow. At the very least, you're going to get at least 1 or 2 where he breaks the pocket, runs down the sidelines very slowly, and tempts somebody into pushing him out of bounds, and then flops like a wrestler taking a stone cold stunner, and there's a flag thrown. So at the very least, you'll get that, Choppy, and here's to getting the over the 4.5 rushing attempts as well. It worked for me last weekend, so I'm going to run it back with the Houston Cougars. I'm going to run it back. Houston taking on Kansas on Saturday, and with that total probably ending up somewhere in the high 120s, I'll take the under. Kansas in their last 10, only one of those games has gone over. Houston, I mentioned them last week. The defense is what it is, and I think on the road at Kansas, they're going to lock down even more so in an attempt to keep this a tight one-possession game late and maybe sneak out of the Allen Fieldhouse with a dub against the Jayhawks. So Houston and Kansas, especially if that number is up in the 127, 128 range, I'm going to take the under and continue to ride with the Cougars on the under for my best bet this weekend. We'll be back next weekend to break it all down all over again for you. Don't forget, always on the YouTube channel, Odyssey Sports. Inside your free Odyssey app, AUDACY, in podcast form if you don't get us live every Friday night and Saturday morning right here live coast to coast on the BetQL network. For RJ Choppy, for John Martin, for producer Zach Kroll, I'm Chris Mack. This has been BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put pig in